Gray Buick, female, holding on iPhone in their hands.
Busted. They're up high and right behind you. Getting caught driving while distracted just got a lot more painful in Ontario, and Toronto police are out making sure offenders pay the new high price. We are in the middle of a week-long police crackdown, time to coincide with the new, more severe penalties for driving while distracted. And don't think officers are just trying to spot you from their cruisers. They have other ways of catching you red-handed. Chris Glover is live at Bay and College for us tonight. And Chris, you went on a ride-along today with Toronto Police. That was a little different.
Yeah, Dwight, don't be surprised if you see a police officer on your next commute. Police are taking their campaign to stop distracted driving to new heights, and they're going to be taking that bird's eye view to look right in people's vehicles. What do you think the police officers are doing on the bus?
I honestly have no idea.
Photo shoot or something like that?
A photo shoot? No, they're working.
Really?
The officer's not after anyone on here. He's after people out there.
Right there, buddy.
I have a Gray Buick.
So instead of having the phone up to the ear, folks are knowing that the rules are changing, putting it down to their lap, down below.
So why do you use the TTC buses to look into people's cars?
Yeah, so it's just the point of view. It's the angles that we get. So this gets us even higher. And so we love the perspective.
These officers are not alone. There are another 4 police cruisers who are tailing this TTC bus, looking for those who are distracted.
When you're driving a fully marked scout car, it's kind of hard to sneak up on people. But still, when people are so distracted and so into their conversations, they won't even look up. We're not aware of their surroundings.
Right. Have you ever had somebody be like, hang on, I'm just on the, oh, shoot, officer here.
Yeah, some people are like, just get mad at me, like I'm honking at them, and they're like, you know, they know they're honking at them, but they're not sure who's honking at them until they look up and they're like, oh, great, it's an officer.
The reason why I'm stopping you, sir, you're being stopped for being on your cell phone.
You caught a bunch of people today. How satisfying is that for you?
Well, it is. It's just sad to see how many people are not getting the message.
Maybe they'll get the message with steeper fines. Starting this year, a first conviction could cost you $1,000, 3 demerit points, and a 3-day suspension. The second time, double the fine and demerits, and a 7-day suspension. If you do it again, it could cost you $3,000, 6 more demerit points, and a months-long suspension. Do you take the bus very often?
Every day.
Do you ever find yourself looking out the window and spotting drivers on their phones?
I see it all the time. Even when I'm crossing the light, I almost got hit by a car. They were talking on the phone.
What do you think about the fact that we hear about all these blitzes, all this information, that it's so dangerous to drive distracted on the phone, and yet people continue to do it?
Don't be on your phone. It takes 1 second for an accident to happen, and people die. It's not worth it. The person can wait.
Why do you think it is that people aren't getting the message that they can't be on their phones and drive?
Like, I've been hearing a lot the ad on the news. It's like, how young do they have to be before you care about child poverty?
Yeah.
And it's like that. Like, how bad does it have to get before you realize that what you're doing is a risk to the lives of others and even yourself?
The stats around distracted driving are alarming. A person who's using their phone while driving is 4 times more likely to get into a collision than a regular driver. And here in Ontario, the most recent stats show that someone is injured in a distracted driving collision once every half hour, Dwight.
Yeah, that's just like drunk driving. We're trying to make it unacceptable in our society. Thank you for that, Chris. And a pedestrian is dead after being hit by a dump truck in Lawrence Heights. It happened just after 1 p.m. at Marley and Lawrence near Allen Road. The 40-year-old man was crossing the street when he was hit by the truck coming off the Allen Expressway. The man was taken to hospital where he later died. Police initially thought it was a hit and run because the driver failed to remain at the scene, but through witness interviews and security video, they were able to rule that out. The driver is now cooperating with police. No charges have been laid yet.
The president of the union that represents LCBO workers says they are losing $77 million a year due to theft. I'm Greg Ross. I'll tell you what he says they need to do to fix that problem.
The Special Investigations Unit has completed its probe into officers' conduct during the July shooting spree on the Danforth. calling their actions commendable. Faisal Hussein killed 2 young women and exchanged gunfire with police, but ultimately investigators say he killed himself. Mike Wise is tracking the latest on this story for us. Mike?
Dwight, the SIU released a detailed summary and analysis today of what happened that Sunday night back in July, saying police were on scene within 6 minutes of the first reports of a shooting outside Papa's Grill on the Danforth. Officers approached Faisal Hussein, guns drawn, and he turned to them and then fired many times. The report says officers did return fire before Hussein fled. They later found his lifeless body a few blocks away. Hussein died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. The report clearing officers of any wrongdoing, saying the shooter decided to kill himself rather than surrender to police. The SIU's director stating in this case there is no evidence that the responding officers' actions were anything but commendable in the face of truly perilous circumstances. The report calling the officers' actions entirely appropriate given those circumstances, right?
And Mike, this SIU report comes just after we learn more details about the shooter and what police found in his home.
That's right, Dwight. Those details are coming from some newly released court documents, fewer redactions on them. They were detailing what officers found when they searched his family's apartment in the Thorncliffe Park neighborhood. That included a startling amount of ammunition. According to the documents, a sniffer dog trained to detect explosives zeroed in on Hussein's bedroom. There, as CBC Toronto reported last year, police found 2 AK-47 magazines, 2 9mm handguns, all fully loaded. They also found other handgun and shotgun ammunition and what is described as a white powdery substance. Now, in his bedroom, police also found a number of DVDs by U.S. conspiracy theorist Alex Jones, some of them about 9/11 conspiracy theories. Now, police also seizing laptops, iPads, and various cameras in hopes of combing through them to try to understand the full extent of what occurred or what he was planning to do. Dwight?
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
With his head shaved and his beard gone, alleged serial killer Bruce MacArthur was back in court today as he prepares for a trial set to begin next year. His case was put over this morning and a date was set for him to appear again in almost 2 weeks. MacArthur is charged with 8 counts of first-degree murder. The remains of 8 men were found in and around a home where he stored his landscaping equipment. York Regional Police appealing for witnesses and video after a man was shot near the Highway 407 subway station. Police were called just after 11 p.m. to a parking lot near Jane and the 407. There, they found the victim, a 21-year-old Toronto man with a gunshot wound. He was taken to hospital with serious injuries. Police are looking for any witnesses they haven't spoken to yet and for video that drivers or businesses in the area may have from around that time. Recent reports of brazen thefts in LCBO stores have put a spotlight on the tens of millions of dollars worth of booze being stolen off the shelves. Now the head of the union says employees are at risk. Greg Ross joins us live from the LCBO at King and Spadina. And Greg, we've been covering more and more stories about LCBO thefts in recent months.
That's right, Dwight. Well, this is at least the 3rd time in the last month that we've reported on similar issues surrounding theft at LCBO stores. Now, last month, Toronto police were investigating a rash of thefts in the West End at LCBO stores, claiming that at least 10 people were involved in this rash of thefts that amounted in hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of booze being stolen. Now, the LCBO won't confirm that theft at their stores is on the rise, but the head of the union says his workers claim that they are seeing more and more of it, and as a result, they are feeling more and more concerned about their safety.
This is very, very demoralizing, and it's dangerous.
OPSEU President Smokey Thomas says, based on statistics released by the LCBO, the union has determined the LCBO lost around $77 million to theft last year.
They actually report that they lost 1.4% of revenues on $5.5 billion, so one of my researchers did the math, works out to $77 million loss to theft last year. That's a lot of money.
What do you think of that number? Wow, that's a lot. I mean, it's a staggering thing.
Oh wow, That's something to wrap your head around, I guess. I did not even know that.
The LCBO would not confirm that number, but in a statement, a spokesperson said LCBO losses due to shrinkage and shop theft are below retail industry standard. This tweet went viral this week, which seems to show a man casually walking out of an LCBO with a basket full of pricey scotch. Last month, Toronto police arrested 2 women as part of an investigation into a rash of LCBO thefts. They claim the suspects were walking in, filling up bags with expensive liquor, and then leaving without paying. Thomas says employees are instructed not to attempt to physically stop them.
You know, they'll say, sir, you got to pay for that. Sir, you got to pay for that. But beyond that, they can't intervene, nor should they. Not, you know, no amount of booze or money or in a bank or a corner store, nothing's worth your life.
But the LCBO says they have taken many other measures to prevent theft. They told us, we have increased our investigator expenditures as well as CCTV technology, in-store deterrence, and always collaborate with local police on active investigations.
If that's deterrence, how come they lost $77 million in theft last year?
Thomas says he would rather see the LCBO invest in having more security guards stationed in stores.
Imagine what you could do with $77 million to prevent theft and have some security in the stores. Probably most important of all would keep the staff and the customers safe. I fear somebody's going to get hurt.
Now, Thomas says he has written letters to Premier Doug Ford, Finance Minister Vic Fideli, as well as the LCBO, asking them to meet face-to-face and try and work on a solution together. He says so far, none of them have responded. Dwight?
Greg, thank you.
10 years ago, I probably think that I was somewhere like maybe washing clothes in a river. To refugees, I would probably tell them to be courageous and be strong and know that you coming here as a refugee doesn't mean that you're limited in what you can do.
He fled Burundi during the Civil War, and soon he'll be the newest member of the Toronto Police Service. Coming up, we'll introduce you to Alain Arakaza, hopefully I got that right, and tell you his journey from refugee to police officer. Winter has truly kicked in here in the province. Icy conditions wreaked havoc on the highways last night. 5 drivers were caught up in a crash on Highway 401 in Pickering. It all started around 1:30 this morning just west of Port Union Road when a stalled vehicle was hit by another car and set off a chain reaction. And there was an even worse pileup near Bolton. Just before 6 this morning, 18 vehicles collided on Highway 50 and Mayfield Road. Several people suffered minor injuries. Here in the city, we got a dusting of snow for the morning commute shortly after temperatures started to plunge. And right now, the city is under an extreme cold weather alert. And Colette joins us now to tell us all about it.
Oh, yes. That cold air, Dwight, has been filtering in behind the front as those winds turn to the northwest. So this morning was milder than what we've experienced through the afternoon, and the temperatures continuing to fall. -8 at the moment for us in the city. We're finding the winds from the northwest sustained over 20 kilometers an hour, but we've had gusts 30, 40 kilometers an hour. Those are starting to ease up, and that's nice to see, at least the winds not being as strong. But still, we are looking at a wind chill. What it feels like out there, -16, and only getting colder through the overnight hours. Now, we have been seeing some of that squall activity we had earlier because the winds have been easing up a bit. That's been dying off. This is just some Virga not really showing up. So we're getting into a situation with just a few clouds out there for the overnight hours. So it's somewhat quiet tonight into tomorrow. Some scattered flurries are possible, but mostly we're going to see dry conditions. However, as we get into tomorrow evening, another little system skirting to the south of us is going to bring in a dusting of snow to maybe a few centimeters. We'll take a look at the accumulations then for Thursday night. Plus, we'll look at the storm coming for the weekend a little later in the show. But for tonight, overnight, -12 to -14 for the lows, feeling closer to -20. And tomorrow afternoon, -4. That's the best we can do for our high temperature, Dwight.
We'll have to take it. Thank you, Colette.
You're welcome.
British Prime Minister Theresa May has survived a confidence vote in the British Parliament. It's just the latest drama in the ongoing Brexit saga, and it comes after her Brexit deal was voted down yesterday. Briar Stewart now with the latest from London.
The ayes to the right, 306. The noes to the left, 325. So the noes
It was a narrow victory, but a victory nonetheless. Prime Minister Theresa May and the Conservatives survived a vote of no confidence by a margin of 19 votes. It came after a bruising debate this afternoon. The Labour Party attacked May on a number of fronts. The party leader accused her of running a zombie government, and the deputy leader took a slightly different approach, and he made it very personal.
We know she's worked hard, but the truth is she's too set in her ways, too aloof to lead. She lacks the imagination and agility to bring people with her. She lacks the authority on the world stage to negotiate this deal. Ultimately, she has failed.
But after hours of debate and the vote, the government still had the confidence of the House, and May outlined her plans for the next few days. She's going to be meeting with parliamentary leaders to negotiate with them and see what can be done to get them on side and get their support for this withdrawal agreement.
The House has put its confidence in this government. I stand ready to work with any member of this House to deliver on Brexit and ensure that this House retains the confidence of the British people.
There were repeated calls for May to take the option of a no-deal departure off the table. There have been many warnings about the potential implications of the UK leaving the EU without an agreement. Businesses are worried about how it will affect their ability to import and export, and there are concerns about gridlock at the border. But May has always said that the best way to avoid the potential chaos of a no deal is to vote for the agreement that she has. Now, she's going to be coming back to Parliament with some kind of plan B, and then her next challenge will be getting MPs to support it, and then getting EU officials on side as well. Briar Stewart, CBC News, London.
And May took her case directly to the public with a statement carried live in the evening. It was a call for the nation to work together on the Brexit challenge.
In a historic vote in 2016, the country decided to leave the EU. In 2017, 80% of people voted for parties that stood on manifestos promising to respect that result. Now, over 2.5 years later, it's time for us to come together, put the national interest first, and deliver on the referendum.
That's what makes me angry, is because this is one of the reasons why women don't want to speak out, is because of that intimidation and the fear of being questioned and ostracized with the community.
She says sexual assault is something that's rarely talked about in her community, but Rachel Cruz is telling her story, hoping it changes the way her culture approaches the topic. We'll bring you that after the break.
The weather update is brought to you by Train Extreme Conditions Testing. It's hard to stop a train, really hard. Train, the most reliable heating and cooling brand.
A Filipino-Canadian media personality is sharing her Me Too story, hoping it will prompt others in her community to speak out. Rachel Cruz says she was sexually assaulted in a Toronto hotel room in 2017. As Farah Morelli explains, Cruz says it's a topic rarely talked about in her culture and community, and she's trying to change that.
She's a lifestyle host in Toronto's Filipino community, known for her confidence.
Where do you get that creative vision?
But this week, Rachel Cruz showed a different side to the public.
I was sexually assaulted about more than a year and a half ago.
Standing in front of her peers at a meeting of the National Ethnic Press, Cruz showed her vulnerable side. She described how a man she thought she was meeting for business tried to force himself on her.
I felt trapped in that room, even though it was just 40 minutes.
Cruz penned an opinion piece in The Philippine Reporter, a Toronto-based newspaper, detailing the alleged attack. She says the suspect is a member of her community.
What prompted you to write this public post that was shared so widely?
I wanted people to know that this is happening, and if it happened to me, I'm sure it's happened to other women, and maybe it's time that we start discussing it as a community.
Cruz says she waited to speak out until after the matter was dealt with in the courts. The piece generated plenty of response.
It's just the ones that stood out for me it's coming from men who was just questioning sort of like what I was doing there, or what was I wearing that time, and why did I go there?
Whenever women or children speak out about experiences of abuse, there is, they often tend to be not believed.
Mythia Square is with Gabriela Ontario, a group that advocates for Filipino women. She describes the Filipino culture as one that's historically rooted in patriarchy.
Well, sexual assault or sexual abuse is something, or violence against women in general, is something that's not really widely discussed in our community.
Filipinas were characterized as soft-spoken, passive women.
Judith Gonzalez advocates for Filipino caregivers and nannies. She says they're even less likely to speak out against sexual violence for fear of losing their jobs.
Because of how the program works. Most of the caregivers doesn't want to ruin their dream to become permanent resident in 2 years.
All three women are now working side by side on a campaign called Filipinas Speak Out. Their goal, to let women in their community know there are supports for them if they want to speak out.
So instead of focus on victim blaming, how about we focus on sort of bringing up women, strong women.
There's a brave young woman right there. Farah joins us now. Whatever happened with her case, though?
Yeah, it's interesting, Dwight. We know that she did file a complaint with police, and Toronto police confirmed to us that they did arrest and charge a suspect with sexual assault, but there was never any conviction. They settled for a peace bond in that case. And the reason that's important is that one of the things that a lot of the women I spoke to told me is that one of the reasons they're also afraid of speaking out is that they're worried that there won't be any repercussions or nothing will happen from them speaking out. Nonetheless, women like in the ones in the groups that you just saw there are still hoping that Rachel's story will encourage some of them to speak out.
Thank you for bringing it to us. For some time now, Canada and Russia have been at odds over Russian aggression in Ukraine, but now a Russian journalist who's friendly with the Kremlin is heating up the fight by spreading a new theory. He claims Ottawa is being manipulated from the inside by Ukrainian nationalists who are sympathetic to Nazis. Chris Brown has the story.
Dmitry Kiselov has a special place among Russian propagandists. He's the only Russian journalist sanctioned by Canada for disseminating what the government considers to be Kremlin lies. And for his first primetime show of 2019, he zeroed in on Canada and its 1.5 million strong Ukrainian community. They're the ones that dictate Canadian foreign policy, said the woman who's listed as a director of the Russian Congress of Canada, a group seen as being very pro-President Vladimir Putin. Kiselov's program visited a Ukrainian cemetery in Oakville. It's filled with the graves of Ukrainians who fought with the Nazis against Russia during the Second World War. which appeared to be the central theme, that Ukrainian Nazi descendants
Justin Trudeau
hold political power in Canada. Foreign Affairs Minister Chrystia Freeland and Liberal MP Boris Shizhnevsky and his family, dressed in their traditional Ukrainian vyshyvankas, were singled out.
And it was seen as a sign of, oh my goodness, see, we told you, they're infiltrating, it's just ludicrous.
Controlling Ukraine is central to Putin's goal of making Russia a global superpower again, says Shizhnevsky.
Without Ukraine, Russia ceases to be an empire.
The anti-Ukrainian rhetoric has intensified here ever since Russia's Navy shot at and then captured Ukrainian warships and their crews near the disputed Crimean Peninsula. Now, with Ukrainian elections just around the corner, the Kremlin's propaganda machine may be turning its focus to Ukraine's strongest allies. Chris Brown, CBC News, Moscow.
Metrolinx will hold a community meeting here near Bathurst and Eglinton tonight after canceling a plan to close the intersection for several months as part of their work on the Crosstown LRT. We'll tell you what led to that decision coming up.
Metrolinx and Crosslinx are ripping up plans to close the Bathurst and Eglinton intersection for 7 months. The transit agency is holding a meeting later tonight to deliver the news to residents. The closure would have allowed them to finish part of the Crosstown LRT faster. Taylor Simmons is live at Bathurst and Eglinton now with the latest. And Taylor, we're guessing the change comes after hearing strong opposition from area residents.
Yeah, that's right, Dwight. And that's not exactly the reaction that Metrolinx was expecting when they came up with this plan. And that's because, as you can see behind me, construction's been going on in this area for quite a while. And there are lane restrictions, there are turn restrictions, creating quite a lot of traffic and some safety concerns that residents thought with turning in and out of neighborhoods. And so Metrolinx thought by closing this intersection for 7 months, they would get everything done Forest Hill Station by the summer. But when they delivered this plan to the community, that's not the reaction that they got. So we'll show you some video from that community meeting now. So there are a couple things that Metrolinx was up against. First, most residents were angry that they hadn't been consulted on the plan. Some didn't even know about it until right before the meeting. So they said they were concerned that there would be more traffic concerns, that their buses wouldn't be able to go through the neighborhood. And second, councillors also showed up at the meeting and said that Metrolinx didn't have a permit to close the intersection for the time that they wanted, and the plan wasn't approved to go ahead. So in the end, Metrolinx was asked to come back with more options, and that's what tonight's community meeting is all about. So one of those options, of course, is not doing that closure because it's been scrapped. So we got a statement from Metrolinx just a few hours ago, and they said, "We acknowledge we could have done a better job engaging the community. While closing Bathurst Street would have accelerated construction of Forest Hill Station by 3 months, we understand the community did not feel this benefit outweighed the impacts on area residents." And I spoke to one of those area residents earlier who will be at that meeting, which is just down the road from here. And here's why she said there was such strong opposition to this closure.
It was really about safety. Our residential streets are already so gridlocked. School children are moving out of the way of cars that are going on the sidewalk as they get to school. People can't get out of their driveways for 20 minutes, and we just couldn't imagine a situation where our residential streets were going to get even more traffic. I'm hoping to hear from Metrolinx about how they plan to finish the station, while also taking into account the concerns of our community. And I think them withdrawing this is a great first plan for us to come together and listen to each other and find a middle ground here.
So she's hoping to hear from Metrolinx at the meeting tonight. Now, with the closure off the table, what will the focus of the meeting be then?
So Metrolinx says they still want input from the community on what they'll do going forward, and it's not quite clear what that will be yet. But one of the options proposed at the last meeting, one that we heard about, was keeping this intersection closed longer, so until December was the estimate at that time. And they would just move the construction zones around the intersection, put different lane restrictions, turning lanes in place. But we'll have more information on that tonight at 11. But Dwight, for anyone wondering, this whole project, the Crosstown LRT, is supposed to be done in 2021.
Thank you, Taylor. A new review is stirring up old conversations. The provincial government announced yesterday it plans to assess regional governments. While amalgamation isn't the review's focus, it's bringing back memories of the megacity merger back in 1998. The Monk School's Enid Slack studied the legacy of Toronto's amalgamation, and I met with her today to hear what she thinks of this review.
I think every 20 or 25 years, we should look at our regions and see if they are functioning the way we want them to function. You know, over the last 25 years, the population has changed, the demographics have changed, the economy of these regions have changed. So it's, you know, it's time to say, does this still work in this new world 25 years later?
This review is also bringing about now talk about amalgamation, which is a bad word to some people. Do you think amalgamation could come out of this review?
Well, I'm hoping the review will look at a number of different options. Amalgamation could be one of them. I think we have to look at balancing regional interests with local interests. So there's a lot of regional things like land use planning and transportation, economic development that we think of as regional issues, but at the same time, you know, people living in local communities, and we want to make sure that those communities are responsive to them and they get their concerns heard. So some things call for a larger regional government, others call for smaller local governments. You know, a lot of people say there are going to be cost savings from an amalgamation, but our experience looking at Toronto, but also at other metropolitan areas around the world, suggests that, you know, when two small municipalities merge, you might get some savings, but when you have a large amalgamation, generally the costs go up and not down. The amalgamation that was done in 1998, in my view, created a city that was too big to be locally responsive, yet too small to deal with the regional issues.
The purpose that we heard at the time was to save money. So did it save us money?
Well, I don't think it did save us money. We did some studies here about 10 years ago, and we looked at expenditures per capita adjusted for inflation for the 10 years before amalgamation in each of the municipalities, and then we looked at the expenditures per capita for the 10 years after amalgamation. So our data was from 1998 to 2008. And we looked at services like fire, garbage collection, and parks and recreation and libraries. And for all of them except for libraries, the expenditures per capita in adjusted for inflation were going down before amalgamation, but they went up after.
What does Premier Ford then need to keep in mind as they review this process and they go through it? What does he need to keep in mind?
Well, I think it's important to do the consultation that they're planning to do. I think it's important to hear from local politicians, local governments, the business community, civil society, to see what the problems are and what the problems we're trying to solve, and then what some of the solutions are. I think these places are different. So I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all answer to all of these regional governments, and I think they have to be looked at individually.
When we're deciding what to do, then should we do it different for different things? Maybe we'll go regional for transit, maybe different for garbage pickup. What do you think?
Well, I think you do have to look at all of the services and who should be delivering them. Some of them may be regional beyond each of these individual regions to the whole Greater Toronto Area, in the case of the Greater Toronto Area regions. Again, I go back to the regional and the local. What is regional and what is local? And so that they may be different. You're right, the different services at different levels.
No easy answer.
There's never an easy answer.
Appreciate your time, Enid.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Objects themselves are like tangible pieces of the past, which really have a monetary value, but what has value is just the stories that they tell about the site.
It was a home renovation turned archaeological dig. How this Etobicoke man uncovered a trove of historical artifacts in his basement. We'll bring you that story a little later in the show. A trucking company has been fined in the wake of a deadly crash near Kingston. It happened in March of 2017 on Highway 401. A truck containing a dangerous acid was traveling from Montreal to Burlington. A winter storm caused near whiteout conditions on the highway, and fluorosilicic acid poured onto the road and doused the driver, who later died. 29 other people were injured, including 13 first responders. Titanium Trucking was charged $250,000 for allowing a toxic substance to leak into the environment. The Transportation Safety Board has been called in to assist with the investigation of last week's deadly bus crash in Ottawa. Police say the TSB will support the work of investigators but will not play a role in assigning blame.
Our officers do amazing work. They're experts in their field, but there are certain things that the TSB does have access to, and expertise and technicians and engineers that will help us find all the answers that we are looking for.
3 people were killed Friday when the double-decker bus crashed into a bus shelter. Despite earlier reports, police now confirm that all 3 were passengers. 2 people were also seriously injured when they were thrown from the bus. The next steps are to examine the bus, reconstruct the accident, and finish interviewing witnesses. Police have spoken to the driver and have ruled out impaired driving. From escaping civil war in Africa to becoming a Toronto police officer. He's a young man who came here as a refugee 10 years ago, and now he's taking the hardship from his past and putting it toward serving and protecting our city. Alicia Son met him today at the Toronto Police College.
I'm originally from Burundi in East Africa. There was some civil war. We had to flee the country to Nairobi, Kenya. Over there, like we went through some rough stuff in Nairobi. I lost my mom in Nairobi as well, and it wasn't easy. We went through some days without eating meals.
So right now on Twitter, everybody is sharing the photo of where they were and who they were 10 years ago versus now. Your story is amazing. It's got to like trump everybody else's.
10 years ago, I probably think that I was somewhere like maybe washing clothes in a river.
Alain Arakaza came to Canada in 2009.
Coming here as a refugee, I knew that I have some skill sets of going through struggles of life that I could easily translate to this job to help other people.
I interact with Cadet Arakaza every morning. I'm one of the parading sergeants here at the college.
Right, left, right, left.
He stood out from day one. He brings a different perspective. He understands struggle, he understands sacrifice, he understands being in a place where sometimes law enforcement, other law enforcement didn't treat him favorably. Some of his experiences from as a young child and growing up through his adolescence have given him, I guess, a depth in character that we desperately seek.
I am a recruit cadet here at the Toronto Police Service. I just finished.
We were first introduced to the proud cadet in a Twitter video.
There are so many people coming as refugees, and I really came from zero to wearing the police uniform that I am wearing today.
It's been viewed over 40,000 times.
Next thing I know, my phone was ringing all the time. Some of the few comments I was able to see, I saw one individual who asked if I can come and speak to their school.
Oh.
And I saw another person commenting that I came here as a refugee. This is really, you're like a motivation for me. So those comments made me really feel good.
What is it going to feel like when you officially get your badge?
I'm probably going to cry. I've been waiting for this moment for a long time.
I think that whatever division he ends up going to is going to be lucky.
To refugees, I would probably tell them to be courageous and be strong and know that you coming here as a refugee doesn't mean that you're limited in what you can do.
The 25-year-old gets his badge at the end of the month, and with his mom watching over him, he'll serve, protect, and inspire.
10 years later, I would have never thought I would be sitting in a Toronto police cruiser serving the population of this amazing country that welcomed me.
Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
Congratulations, young man. An OPP officer who lost one of his legs over 4 years ago was actually back out on patrol today. That's 45-year-old Constable Pete Tucker this afternoon, his first shift since the freak accident 4.5 years ago. In June 2014, Tucker's motorcycle struck a goose during a training exercise north of Barrie, leaving him seriously injured and causing him to lose his left leg above the knee. He now uses a prosthetic. We spoke to him nearly a year ago when he first returned to work, but at that time it was mostly a desk job. The OPP tweeted this video today as Constable Tucker was back on the road. Stay with us. We'll be right back. What kind of mysteries lie within your basement? Well, for an Etobicoke family, uncovering treasures in their creepy crawl space has become a reality. They started finding artifacts during renos in their home, which is more than 170 years old. And as Talia Ritchie tells us, that was extra special for one member who's a bit of a history buff.
This is a jaw harp, and it's a very common 19th century musical instrument.
Vito Vaccarelli is a man who loves the stories that old stuff can tell.
They could be hundreds of years old, or they could be thousands. You know that the people who lived here liked to write. They were writing messages.
And for the last few years, home renovations have revealed historical clues about what was happening on this land well before his family moved in.
This is the part that we broke into and got into the crawl space and started disturbing the soil. That's when all these artifacts started popping up.
Now, Vaccarelli really is the perfect candidate to have a home full of history. Before he became a teacher, he worked as an archaeologist, and he worked on sites like this one at Fort York, as well as War of 1812 sites and on several archaeological digs.
As soon as I was finding these things, it was pretty easy for me to date them, and I knew that what we were finding was a lot older than the house itself. This is a blacksmith token. It's, they date from the 1820s, 30s, 40s.
Coins, animal bones, inkwells, there's been dozens of discoveries. Some have even been made by his kids.
In the backyard planting stuff or digging the pond, I found in like cow bones, I think a cow shoulder bone once.
I just found like some arrowheads, like flakes.
When it comes to next steps, the plan is to properly catalog the items in a database, write an official report, and eventually find a home for these artifacts. But in the meantime, they seem to be in good hands.
They're all in bags because as an archaeologist, professionally, I had this responsibility to try to make sure that everything was in context.
And while it's created a bit of extra work for Vaccarelli on top of the home renos,
the soil was up to about here.
You could say he digs it. Talia Ricci, CBC News, Toronto.
So for all the folks out there procrastinating on cleaning up the basement, hey, a little archaeological dig. You might find something down there, Colette.
Yeah, there we go, and I love that. He digs it, of course.
That was a good line from Talia, yes.
Yeah, that was a good one. I don't know what you thought of the weather today when we had our mildest air at the beginning of the day and then the temperature falling through the day. So 0, that came in this morning, that freezing right around 9 a.m., and then the temperature coming down as that cold front passed through. And so now we're sitting at -8, Mississauga -8, Markham -9, Oshawa at -9, and then you factor in these northwesterly winds, not quite as gusty as what they were earlier, but there you go. It feels like we're in the minus teens, certainly, and overnight tonight almost -20 in terms of what we're getting into with the wind chill. At least we've been seeing a clearing trend. That's part of the problem, though, with the colder air moving in. High pressure driving in that colder air that we're seeing around Goddard. It's a little bit of light stuff there, but the other stuff has really backed off because the winds have been easing off. Now, there's a system. We're getting a couple of things coming through in the next 3 to 4 days. So the first one's like an appetizer with some light snow, and then we could see some more significant snow as we go into the weekend. So tomorrow we're going to see that first system just kind of skirting rather to the south of us. As it does, cloud cover comes in into the lunch hour. We'll start to see light snow in southwestern Ontario. Tomorrow night we're going to see some of that light snow coming into the GTA and carrying on through the overnight, ending before morning, but we could still have some wet roadways. This is why I call it an appetizer. Maybe a dusting to a couple of centimeters that we're talking about for Thursday night. Overnight tonight, though, quieter conditions, -12, -14 in Markham, -11 in St. Catharines. And then tomorrow afternoon, this is about the best we're going to do. St. Catharines at -3, -5 for Markham, and elsewhere we're talking about temperatures around -4 for the high in the afternoon. It's still even then going to feel like -10. Now, the snow showers through the overnight. Friday, that temperature, you see it's nearly steady there. Overnight it is 0 for the high on Friday, and then more cold air comes in, one ingredient, and another system coming in from the south. Still a little early to see how this is going to track, so say 5, 10, maybe 15 centimeters of snow coming in on Saturday. And as we get to tomorrow, we'll only be 2 days out, Dwight, so I'll have much more confidence in terms of looking at those accumulations.
Shovels at the ready. Thanks, Colette.
Yeah, get some exercise.
Well, we were definitely one part MacGyver, one part red green because we had a lot of duct tape involved as well. We were fishing for a phone. Any kind of fishing is fun, right? A bad day fishing is better than a good day at work, as
Yeah,
they
we
say,
never
so.
actually fished all day.
I loved red green. They weren't looking for dinner, but searching the water for a phone. Coming up, we'll tell you if their MacGyver plan actually worked. That story after the break.
The weather update is brought to you by Train Extreme Conditions Testing. It's hard to stop a train, really hard. Train, the most reliable heating and cooling brand.
If you've ever lost your cell phone, you know the feeling. All that information, contacts, and pictures gone. But how far would you go to get it back? Bonnie Allen brings us the tale of two fishermen who went to great lengths, or in this case, great depths, to retrieve a phone.
We're fishing, we're having a great day, we're catching lots of perch.
Every fisherman loves to brag about the big catch. This story is no different. Luke Lemoyne was recently ice fishing with his daughter Emily and buddy Jason Matity.
So I bent over and the phone just plopped right out. Didn't even hit the edge of the hole. I didn't even get a chance to try to grab for it or anything. It just went right in, directly in the hole. And then I'm starting to think about, you know, all the photos and the stuff I've got saved on there. And
That dark object is the phone. That's the frustrating part. You could see it on our underwater camera. So we knew it was there, we knew where it was.
The cell phone was 9 meters down below the ice in a dark, murky lake. Lemoyne knew the phone was a lost cause, but the SD card contained precious photos of his late father, who died of cancer last year.
well, I last saw my dad last May, and then he died a month later, so we had a good visit. I knew the pictures were on there, and I hadn't backed them up.
And it was a leather case, so you thought if you could get a hook in there, you might be able to just snag it. But all we did is we kept stirring up mud and silt, and kind of every attempt we were almost burying the phone.
The friends went home to make a rescue plan. 2 days later, they returned with 25 meters of plumbing pipe and 2 giant ladles.
Kind of like chopsticks, so you can kind of work one against the other. Well, we were definitely one part MacGyver, one part red green because we had a lot of duct tape involved as well. We were fishing for a phone. Any kind of fishing is fun, right? A bad day fishing is better than a good day at work.
Yeah, we never actually fished all day.
It took 6 hours and several failed attempts. Finally, they pulled the cell phone 9 meters up to the surface.
The feeling of success was as good as catching any fish
Massive
that I've ever
fish,
caught
yeah.
before.
Lemoyne put the SD card in a bucket of rice, and a week later got the photos of his dad back.
It was pretty awesome. First thing I did is I backed it up. Always back your stuff up.
Bonnie Allen, CBC News, Regina.
Like a happy ending. This morning wasn't a bad walk to work, but will it be that way on the way back home tonight? Colette has a final look at the forecast coming up. And what's a show us your GTA picture without a pic of the CN Tower? This is a good one, a lovely winter shot of our CN Tower submitted by Visions Abound. Remember, you can get your photos to us by posting them on Twitter or Instagram with the hashtag CBCYourGTA, and we will air some of them on the show. All right, how's this for a good use of a frozen lake? This is Octopus Lake in southwestern Manitoba. Sean Frey started shoveling out this maze in November. He says he had no real plan for what it would look like, and he and his friends just kept building and adding to it. Some 40 hours later, this is the result, a winter wonderland.
Very cool, but that's 40 hours of voluntary shoveling.
Yeah,
right?
and who wants to do that? This weekend, though, we're going to have to clear our ice. Yeah, what's happening?
Yeah, we've got a few things going on, so that's what I was sort of saying. We've got the one system coming in tomorrow night, kind of a dusting, maybe to 2 centimeters of snow, so overnight Thursday, and then yet another one coming for Saturday, which will be more significant. You might really have some shoveling to do then. Overnight tonight, though, -12, partly cloudy skies out there, not too many clouds. It's going to feel more like -19, and then tomorrow we are looking at a mix of sun and cloud, and -4 for the afternoon high. That's about the best that we can do. So we do have the extreme cold weather alert in place tonight.
I'll be shoveling on the weekend. This morning I was walking out the house. My wife was already out there shoveling, and the neighbor was looking at me like, dude, really? You ever out here shoveling? But it was just a dust thing.
I was going to say, making you look bad.
Yeah. I'm going to shovel this weekend. I'm ready. Thank you, Colette.
That's why she was doing it. So this weekend you'll be out there.
Right? That's it for us tonight. We'll be back here tomorrow at 6. Thank you for joining us. Mike Wise has you covered tonight at 11. Have a great evening, everybody.